There's something wrong with the guy who buys gum. I know how that sounds. Trust me, after 6 months of working graveyard at Quick Stop, I've seen every flavor of weird you can imagine. Meth heads trying to pay with Monopoly money, drunk college kids stealing condoms, that one lady who only shops at 2 a.m. in her wedding dress. But this is different. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like dying insects while I stalk the candy aisle. My phone says 11:47 p.m. I start counting down in my head. 3, 2, 1. The bell chimes. He walks in wearing that same beige coat, perfectly pressed despite the humidity. His shoes never squeak on the linoleum, never leave marks either. I pretend to be busy with the Snickers display, but I'm watching him in the convex security mirror. Same routine. He walks to aisle 3, picks up a pack of Winter Fresh, not from the front, always the third one back, then to the counter display for a blue Bic lighter, always blue. My coworker Mike shuffles past with a mop bucket. Somebody puked in the bathroom again. Have fun with that. I drum my fingers on the counter. Hey, weird question. That guy in the beige coat, do you ever see him on your shifts? Mike leans on his mop. Who? The gum guy. Comes in every night at exactly 11:47. Must be your regular. Mike shrugs. I'm usually stuck with the early morning church crowd. Nothing but Karens and their coupon books. The customer approaches the counter. His smile is too wide, too practiced, like someone who learned to smile from watching others do it. Will that be all? My voice comes out steady, professional. He places the items down with precise movements. Just these. Long night ahead. Something about his voice makes my skin crawl. It's pleasant enough, but there's an echo to it, like he's speaking from the bottom of a well, or like multiple voices speaking in perfect unison. I ring up his purchases, $4.27, same as always. He pays in exact change, but tonight, something's different. As I hand him his receipt, he tilts his head. That's an interesting necklace, Brett. Labradorite, isn't it? Your grandmother's? I freeze. I never told anyone here about Nana's necklace, and I've never worn it to work. It's sitting on my dresser at home. I called in sick the next night, spent 8 hours checking my locks and scrolling through local news reports, missing persons cases, unsolved crimes, anything about stalkers or convenience store creeps. Nothing, at least nothing recent. But buried in archived articles from the past decade, I found a pattern. Every 8 months or so, a night shift worker vanishes. Different stores, different chains, but always convenience stores. Always the graveyard shift. The police connect nothing. Each case is filed separately, each disappearance explained away. One moved back home, another had gambling debts. A third left an apologetic note about starting fresh in California. Their families tell different stories in local Facebook groups. Stories about strange customers, blue flames, beige coats. By the second night, I couldn't afford to miss another shift. Bills don't pay themselves, and my savings account was already running on fumes. Besides, what would I tell Jerry? Sorry, boss. Can't work because a customer knows about my dead grandmother's jewelry. The store feels different now, smaller. The aisles create long shadows that weren't there before, and the security mirror warps faces into grotesque shapes. I keep catching movement in my peripheral vision, but when I turn, it's just my own reflection in the windows. Or maybe someone else's reflection, wearing my face like an ill-fitting mask. Mike slouches against the counter, scrolling through his phone. You look like shit, man. Thanks. I start organizing the lottery tickets, keeping my eyes on the door. 11:43 p.m. Hey, about that guy I mentioned. The gum dude? Mike looks up. You're getting weird about him, like Rachel did. My hands stop moving. Rachel? Yeah, the girl who worked here before you. She kept talking about some creepy regular. Jerry had to let her go when she started freaking out customers. Mike scratches his neck. Think she moved back home or something. Her Facebook's gone dark. I spend my break hunched over my phone in the back room, searching for any trace of Rachel online. Her profile's still there, frozen in time. Last post. Starting my last night shift at Quick Stop. Can't wait to get out of here. 3 likes, 0 comments. The post before that catches my eye. A photo of a small flame, blue as a gas stove. Caption: he keeps leaving these everywhere. Please tell me someone else sees them. The timestamp, 11:47 p.m. I dig deeper. Rachel's mother's profile is a digital shrine now. Missing person posters, candlelight vigil photos, comments full of prayer emojis. The police report mentions a beige coat found in Rachel's apartment, too big to be hers. No signs of forced entry, no body ever found. Just a blue Bic lighter on her pillow, still warm to the touch. One comment on her mother's latest post catches my eye. From another grieving parent 3 states away. I saw her last week at our local Gas and Go. She was behind the counter wearing a beige coat, but when I called her name, she looked right through me, like she didn't know me, like she wasn't really there at all. 11:47 p.m. The bell doesn't chime this time. He's just there, standing in front of the counter. Same beige coat, same manufactured smile. Evening, Brett. He sets down his items. Not gum and a lighter tonight. My throat closes up. It's a pack of Earl Grey tea. My favorite brand, a tin of cat food, the expensive kind I buy for Mr. Whiskers, and a small bottle of prescription sleep medication, the exact prescription I started taking last week. Mike looks between us, confused. Everything okay? The customer's smile widens. His teeth are too white, too uniform. Just picking up a few necessities. Brett knows what I mean. His hands are stained with something blue, like ink or dye, the same shade as his lighter flame. When he moves, I catch a glimpse of his name tag, partially hidden under his coat. Another quick stop badge, from a store I've never heard of. I can't move, can't speak. Mike rings him up instead while I stand there useless. The customer pays in exact change. Oh, and Brett? He's at the door now, though I never saw him walk there. You should really fix that loose window in your kitchen, the one above the sink. Someone could get in. I quit that night. Told Jerry everything while reviewing the security tapes, but the footage showed nothing. Just me, talking to empty air at the counter. Mike swore he never saw anyone. That was 3 hours ago. Now I'm sitting in my bathroom staring at my reflection. There's something taped to the mirror. A receipt from Quick Stop, printed at 3:07 a.m. 1 pack of Winter Fresh gum, 1 blue Bic lighter, and scrawled on the back in perfect handwriting. See you at work tomorrow, Brett. I haven't worked at Quick Stop in hours. But I know with absolute certainty that when I walk into my bedroom, there will be a beige coat hanging in my closet, and it will fit perfectly, just like it fit Rachel, just like it fits all of us who work the night shift now.
And this is my new kitchen. Isn't she gorgeous? I swept my phone camera across the marble countertops, making sure to catch the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Custom everything. And look at this view of the woods. Absolute heaven. My followers were already flooding the live stream with heart emojis. 2 years of lifestyle and home renovation content had finally paid off. I could afford my dream house. Sure, it was a little isolated, backing up against dense forest outside the city, but that just meant better lighting for my videos. At Riley Renovates, did the previous owner leave those flowers? Someone commented. I frowned, turning toward the kitchen island. A small vase with fresh wildflowers sat there, definitely not something I'd arranged. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my camera-ready smile. Oh, these? Must have been my assistant Kate. I quickly panned away. Now let me show you the custom pantry. Later that night, after editing and posting my official house tour video, I noticed the flowers were gone. I texted Kate. Hey, did you bring flowers by today? No, haven't been there since helping you move in last week. Why? I stared at her response, my mouth going dry. The missing time started that night, just 10 minutes while I was making dinner. The chicken was suddenly more cooked than it should have been, and my phone had somehow moved from the counter to the coffee table. That's also when I got the first DM. Love what you've done with the kitchen, Riley. The marble looks even better in person than it did when I first installed it. Your organizing style is just like mine, even down to how you arrange the spice drawer. Alphabetical, right? I hadn't posted about the spice drawer yet. The message came from a blank account named at previous home 394. Their profile picture was a photo of my bedroom, but not from any angle I'd ever posted. It looked like it was taken from inside my closet. I blocked the account immediately, my hands shaking. But an hour later, a new follower appeared. At previous home 395. Their profile picture was me, sleeping in my bed from last night. The caption read, "Welcome home, Riley. I've been waiting for someone who appreciates this house as much as I do." Static crackled through my bedroom's smart speaker at 3 a.m. Through the haze of sleep, I heard a voice whisper, "You still sleep with a nightlight, don't you, Riley? Just like when you were 6 after the accident." I bolted upright. I'd never told anyone about that. Not even my followers knew about the car crash that left me afraid of the dark. The speaker crackled again, then died. My phone lit up with notifications. Somehow I'd posted 3 new stories while I was sleeping. The first showed my empty kitchen. The second, my bathroom mirror. The third was a childhood photo I'd never digitized. Me in a hospital bed, age 6, clutching my worn stuffed penguin. Remember Waddles? A new DM from at previous home 397? He's still in your bottom drawer, isn't he? Right where you unpacked him. My hands trembled as I opened the drawer. Waddles wasn't there. A new story appeared on my account. My penguin, sitting in what looked like my exact bedroom setup. But the walls were concrete. I called the police. They took their time arriving. 3 hours of me jumping at every creak and shadow. 2 officers did a perfunctory walkthrough, flashlight beams sweeping across my carefully staged rooms. Officer Jenkins lingered in my home office, frowning at my security setup. "Your cameras are top of the line," he said, scrolling through footage. "But there's something odd." I leaned forward, hope fluttering in my chest. Finally, someone would believe me. "There's 6 hours missing from last night." He scratched his head. "And the cameras. They're being accessed from inside your network. Probably just a glitch." "A glitch?" My voice cracked. "What about the photos, the DMs? Someone is watching me." His partner shot me a look I recognized from my followers when I posted about Mercury being in retrograde. That gentle, patronizing disbelief. "Miss, there's no sign of forced entry. Your alarm system hasn't been triggered. We can take a report, but..." "But what? Wait until something worse happens?" I pulled up the DMs, my hands shaking. "Look at these messages. They know things about me, private things." Officer Jenkins sighed. "Social media stalking isn't uncommon for influencers. Have you considered taking a break from posting? Maybe staying with family?" They left me with a pamphlet about cyber stalking and a case number I knew would gather dust. I stood in my doorway, watching their patrol car disappear down my long driveway, leaving me alone with my beautiful, treacherous house. Fine. If the police wouldn't help, I'd get proof myself. That night, I set up my own camera, but when I watched the footage in the morning, my blood ran cold. At 2 a.m., my bedroom door opened on its own. A shadow crossed the room, then static. When the picture returned, my laptop was open, posting to my accounts. The final frame showed a figure standing in my doorway, holding Waddles. They waved at the camera. My phone buzzed. At previous home 398. "You looked peaceful sleeping last night. That lavender pillow spray helps with the nightmares, doesn't it? I've been watching you use it every night since you moved in, just like I did." The next DM made my heart stop. "Want to see where I've recreated your bedroom? I'm right below you. In my home. In our home. The home I never left." There was scratching coming from inside my walls. The scratching led me to the pantry. My trembling hands pressed against the back wall, feeling for irregularities. Something clicked. My organized shelves swung forward, revealing a narrow passage. My phone lit up. At previous home, 399. "Coming to visit? I've been waiting so long for someone like you, Riley. Someone who understands how special this house is." The others didn't appreciate it. They left too quickly. The beam of my flashlight revealed a crude wooden staircase. Each step brought me deeper into the house's bones, where the walls turned to rough concrete, just like in the photo with Waddles. A rush of cold air hit my face. The passage opened into a room, my room, every detail perfectly recreated, down to the placement of my jewelry box. But the photos on the walls, they weren't just of me. Dozens of faces, all previous owners, their social media posts printed and arranged chronologically, their lives documented, watched, studied. My flashlight beam caught a collage dedicated to autumn 2023. A woman with copper red hair, at cottagecore_dreaming, showing off her newly installed herb garden. Her last post was captioned, "Can't shake the feeling someone's watching me garden. Getting security cameras tomorrow." The next photo showed her bedroom, empty except for a half-packed suitcase. Final post, "House is gorgeous but something's wrong. Putting it on the market." Spring 2023, at the Vintage Nest, a collector who'd filled the house with antiques. Her posts grew increasingly frantic. "Things keep moving when I'm not looking." Then, "Found old photographs in the walls, people I don't know, all in my bedroom." Her last story update showed her antiques arranged in perfect symmetry. "I didn't do this." Winter 2022, at Home Suite Renovation documented her kitchen remodel. "Contractor says he never installed the extra cabinet I found." 3 days later, "Door keeps unlocking itself." Then silence for a week. Final post at 3:17 a.m. "She says she's making me better." The wall was a timeline of terror. Each owner's excited first post of their dream home, followed by growing paranoia, then desperate attempts to explain away the inexplicable. Some fled within weeks. Others lasted months, their posts growing more erratic until they simply stopped. My own face smiled from the newest section. My first house tour video printed frame by frame. Next to it, blank spaces waited to be filled. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I spun around. A woman stood in the doorway, thin and pale like she'd lived underground for years. She held wattles in one hand, my phone in the other. "I designed this house," she smiled, running her pale fingers along the concrete walls. "My father was a master architect, you know. He built homes for the elite, the visionaries. But they were just houses to him, empty shells for other people's lives." Her eyes took on a fevered gleam. "I learned everything from him, the load-bearing secrets, the hidden spaces between walls. But I saw what he couldn't, that a true home needs to know its owners, to become them." She caressed my phone like a precious artifact. "I spent 15 years perfecting this design. The passages that let you move unseen, the angles that hide cameras in plain sight, the smart system that learns and adapts. My father called it an abomination when he saw the blueprints, said I was sick." Her laugh echoed off the concrete. "He never understood. A house isn't just walls and windows, it's a living thing. It needs to watch, to learn, to grow." Wattles dangled from her grip as she gestured at the walls of photos. "Each owner teaches me something new, shows me how to be better. The tech influencer who installed the first smart locks, the security expert who added camera blind spots, the interior designer who taught me about sightlines and staging." Her smile widened. "But you, Riley, you understand? Presentation, aesthetics. You make this house look the way it always should have, the way I always dreamed." "The others," my voice cracked. "What happened to them?" "They left." She stepped closer. "But you won't. You love this house like I do. I've watched you, learned you, become you." She held up my phone, showing my latest post. A photo of me standing exactly where I was now, taken seconds ago. I had to practice with the others, learn how to slide into their lives, their homes, their minds. Her smile widened. "But you're perfect. You already share everything." She pulled out a laptop plastered with post-it notes, snippets of phrases, common responses, emoji patterns. A second screen showed an AI interface analyzing writing patterns. Technology makes it so much easier now. I used to spend hours studying their captions, their comments, their DM responses. Now the algorithms help me become them. She clicked through folders labeled with usernames. "See? Your morning coffee posts always use golden hour lighting. You respond to comments within an hour, always with an emoji. You type haha instead of lol. Little details matter." The screen showed split-view analytics of my posting habits, timing, engagement patterns, common phrases. The first few days after they disappear are crucial. Followers notice changes, but I've gotten better at the transition. Now, she opened a document full of scheduled posts, perfectly mimicking my style. "Now I can be anyone, everyone, and you." She tapped my phone. "You're my masterpiece. 2 years of content to study. I know you better than you know yourself." She pressed something on my phone. Upstairs, I heard my front door's smart lock click shut. "Now we can share everything." The police found my phone in the woods 3 days later. My social media accounts kept posting perfect, pristine photos of my beautiful house, my dream home. But if you look closely at the kitchen tour videos, sometimes you can see two shadows. And in the comments, at previous home, 399 always likes to remind my followers, "Welcome to our home. We've been waiting for someone like you." The whiskey stains on my apron had barely dried when I stumbled onto the 2:15 a.m. train. My feet ached from a double shift, and the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry wasps above my head. I'd almost taken the earlier train, but a crowd of police officers had shut down the Exchange Place platform. Third time this month, someone had gone missing there. The newspapers never followed up on those stories. 3 other passengers occupied the car. A woman in a business suit slumped against the window, a teenager with headphones, and him. The woman hadn't moved since I'd boarded. Her breath didn't fog the glass. The teenager bobbed his head to music, but his headphone cable dangled loosely, connected to nothing. The cord's severed end swayed with the train's motion. He sat at the far end, directly facing me. An older man in a gray coat that seemed to blend into the shadows. His eyes never left mine. I checked my phone. 2:17 a.m. The train lurched forward, and I pressed myself deeper into the plastic seat, pretending to be absorbed in my screen. When I glanced up again, he was 4 seats closer. My heart stuttered. I hadn't seen him move, hadn't heard footsteps. The businesswoman's reflection in the window showed empty eyes, like holes punched in paper. The teenager's head still bobbed, perfectly rhythmic, like a metronome. He hadn't changed his timing in the last 10 minutes, not even a fraction of a second. 1:46 a.m., my phone displayed. That couldn't be right. We were moving forward, but time was running backward. I looked down at my hands, counting my fingers, a childhood habit for calming nerves. When I raised my eyes again, he was halfway down the car, still staring, still unmoving. His face seemed smoother now, almost like wax. "Exchange Place, next stop," the automated voice announced. Wrong. Exchange Place was in the opposite direction. I'd overheard the station guards talking once about how that announcement sometimes played on trains that never went near Exchange Place. One of them had said his grandfather used to work there in the 60s, back when they'd first sealed off the lower platform. He never said why they sealed it. 25:61 a.m. The lights flickered, and he was 3 seats away. The other passengers were gone. Had they left at the last station? What station was that? My mouth went dry as I realized I couldn't remember. My phone's display flickered between numbers that shouldn't exist. 13, 88, 42, 15, 00, 60. 2:17 a.m. again, 2 seats away. His eyes were black holes in a face that no longer looked quite human. The windows showed only darkness now, not even the usual blur of tunnel lights. Except, were they windows anymore? Each time I looked away and back, they seemed longer, stretching impossibly tall. Yet the train car hadn't changed size. Sometimes they appeared to be on the wrong side of the car. Once I saw my own back through one of them, sitting in the exact position I was in now, wearing that same gray coat I'd seen him in. My phone displayed times in reverse, the digits flowing backward like water up a drain. 1 seat away. My fingers trembled as I reached for the emergency call button. It crumbled under my touch like ancient paper. 5 a.m. Empty seat. The train screeched to a halt at my stop. As I ran out onto the platform, my legs shaking, a security guard caught my arm. "Miss, are you all right? You were talking to yourself the whole ride." I turned back to look at the security monitor mounted on the wall. There I was, alone in the car, gesturing and recoiling from nothing. Except, behind my seat, a dark figure stood perfectly still, its head inclined toward my neck, close enough to whisper. The security footage haunted my dreams. I had watched it 17 times by then, each viewing worse than the last. The guard had sent it to my phone after I broke down sobbing in the station. He probably thought it would help, prove I was just tired, imagining things. Instead, it showed me the truth. My screen flickered as I watched it again. There I was, talking to an empty seat, my face contorted with fear. And there it was, that thing, standing behind me. Its form seemed to shift between frames, like smoke given shape. In some frames, it was tall enough to brush the ceiling. In others, it hunched, its face always turned toward my neck. But there was something else in the footage. Someone had written on the train wall behind me, "It takes you to the exchange." The graffiti appeared in every frame, but each time in a different handwriting. Some looked decades old, others fresh. In one frame, I recognized my own handwriting, though I knew I hadn't written it. Yet. I hadn't taken the subway since that night. 3 weeks of expensive ride shares had drained my savings, but I couldn't go back underground. My manager at the bar kept asking why I wouldn't work closing shifts anymore. He didn't know that his last closing bartender had vanished on her way home, last seen on the Exchange Place platform. The security footage from that night had been corrupted, just static and strange shadows. The thing was, I wasn't sure it mattered, because by then, I saw it everywhere. It started small, a shadow in my bathroom mirror that didn't match my movements, a dark shape in my peripheral vision when I checked my blind spot while driving, the sense of breath on my neck in an empty apartment. My phone showed impossible times again. 3:33 a.m. when it should have been noon. 4:44 p.m. in the middle of the night. Sometimes text messages arrived from my own number, empty, except for timestamps that hadn't happened yet. At the coffee shop, I noticed the man next to me staring at his phone with a trembling hand. The time on his screen read 25:61, the same impossible hour I'd seen on the train. When I tapped his shoulder and pointed to it, he looked at me with glassy eyes and said, "Beautiful weather we're having," though it had been storming for days. He kept repeating it, his smile too wide, while his phone flickered through times that couldn't exist. In the grocery store, I saw a teenage girl showing her friend her phone, giggling about something. The friend's face went slack when she saw the screen, but she kept laughing, a mechanical sound like a broken music box. Later, I saw that same friend walking past the store window over and over, wearing the same clothes, making the same gestures, checking her phone at exactly the same spot. She passed by 17 times before I stopped counting. My coworker Rita was always checking her phone during shifts now. One night, I glimpsed it showing 13:88 a.m. "Rita," I said, "your phone's doing it too?" She turned to me with that same vacant smile I'd seen on the coffee shop man. "I don't have a phone," she said, even as she held it in her hand, even as impossible numbers flickered across its screen. The next day, she acted like we'd never had the conversation. But sometimes I caught her counting her fingers under the bar. One night, I finally worked up the courage to take a selfie, to prove to myself I was being paranoid. In the photo, I smiled nervously at the camera, and behind me, a gray-coated figure stood so close its featureless face touched my hair. The timestamp read, "Tomorrow." When I zoomed in on the photo, I noticed something in the background, a bulletin board I'd never seen in my apartment. It was covered with missing person posters, each photo showing someone wearing that same gray coat, each face increasingly blurred with time. The most recent photo showed an empty coat. The next space on the board was blank, waiting. The next morning, that same bulletin board was on my wall, though I know it hadn't been there before. The blank space now held a clear photo, my driver's license picture from 3 years ago. As I stared at it, the image began to blur. I started counting my fingers obsessively then, the way I had on the train. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a ritual to stay grounded. But that morning, while counting, I noticed something. In the mirror, my reflection's hands had 6 fingers. When I turned to look at my real hands, they were normal, 5 fingers. But in my peripheral vision, I saw 7. When I tried to count them directly again, the numbers shifted between counts, 5, 8, 3, 6. Each finger cast multiple shadows, all moving slightly out of sync. The bathroom mirror wasn't rectangular anymore. Its edges curved inward when I looked directly at them, but in my peripheral vision, they reached out into spirals that shouldn't fit in the wall. Sometimes I caught glimpses of other faces in it, countless people, all wearing the same gray coat, all counting their fingers with increasing desperation. All of them had been me, or would be me, or were me in places where time moved differently? On my way to work, I saw a man in a business suit standing perfectly still on the corner. His lips moved silently as he stared at his hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When he looked up and saw me watching, his eyes went wide with recognition. He opened his mouth as if to call out, but then his gaze shifted to something behind me, and he ran. In the break room at work, I caught my coworker Sarah counting under her breath. Our eyes met in the mirror above the sink. She had the same haunted look I saw in my own reflection every morning. Before I could speak, she turned and walked out. She never came back to work. Sometimes I see her on missing person posters, but in every photo, her hands are blurred. During my last shift at the bar, I watched a woman at table 7 counting her fingers over and over. When I brought her bill, she grabbed my wrist. "How many fingers do other people have?" she whispered. "I keep counting everyone's hands, and the numbers are wrong. They're all wrong." She let go of me suddenly, staring past my shoulder. I didn't need to turn around to know what she saw. I thought I finally understood what was happening. That night on the train, I hadn't been seeing things wrong. I had been looking in the wrong direction. Whatever that thing was, it had been behind me all along, getting closer, growing bolder. And sometimes, when I was alone in my apartment, I heard a familiar sound. The same automated voice from the subway. "Exchange Place, next stop." But I lived nowhere near Exchange Place. Nobody did. Not anymore. The apartment complex across from the station had been condemned years ago, after too many residents reported seeing their own faces in windows where no mirrors hung. The city had painted over the station's original name, visible under the current sign, The Exchange. I wrote this because my phone showed only one time, no matter how often I checked, 5 a.m., the same time he had disappeared on the train. My reflection had stopped mirroring my movements. I could feel breath on my neck. When I finally turned around, there was no gray-coated figure standing behind me. Instead, I saw myself reflected in the window, wearing that familiar gray coat that seemed to blend with the shadows. My other self stared back with black hole eyes, head inclined toward a woman I couldn't see, but could feel sitting exactly where I was, and she was counting her fingers. I used to love how my footsteps echoed through Preston Hall's empty corridors. Now, each echo makes me wonder if they're all mine. Winter break turned Riverside College into a ghost town 3 weeks ago. Most students fled home to their families, leaving behind a skeleton crew of international students, research assistants, and people like me. People who had nowhere better to go. Or maybe just nowhere they wanted to go. The holidays always left me feeling hollow, like I was performing in a play where I'd only learned half my lines, where every family photo felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. My phone buzzed. Mom's third call today. She'd been especially clingy since my 18th birthday last month, calling daily with that hint of panic in her voice, as if she expected me to vanish the moment I became an adult. I watched the phone vibrate across my desk until it fell silent. The screen showed 3:47 p.m. My desk clock read 3:47 a.m. I'd stopped trying to fix it weeks ago. No matter how many times I changed the batteries, it always showed the opposite time of day, then turned back to folding my laundry. The drawer stuck when I tried to open it. It always did. But when it finally gave way, I froze. My favorite blue sweater lay neatly folded on top. The same sweater I'd been searching for all week. The same sweater I was certain I'd seen someone wearing yesterday, walking across the quad. They'd had my exact gait, my habit of tucking my hair behind my ear when the wind caught it. I slammed the drawer shut. The sound bounced off the walls, coming back to me like mocking laughter. Trying to steady my breathing, I pulled out my phone and opened my recent photos. There it was, the picture I'd taken yesterday of the distant figure in my sweater. Except now, looking closer, the figure was wearing a black coat. I'd seen the blue sweater. I know I had. My desk lamp cast my shadow on the wall. No, my shadows. 2 of them, slightly out of sync, like an image with poor reception. I blinked hard and they merged back into one. Something tapped against my window. Just the wind, probably, or an icicle falling. But when I looked up, a sticky note fluttered on the other side of the glass. 3rd floor. No trees nearby, no ledge. In messy handwriting, "You forgot to call Mom back." The timestamp on my mom's last call was exactly 1 minute ago. I ran to the window and yanked it open, cold air rushing in. The sticky note drifted into my room, but there was no one there. No footprints in the fresh snow below. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Hello? Look outside your door." A familiar voice, but I couldn't place it. Then they hung up. My heart pounding, I walked to my door. The peephole showed an empty hallway. I opened it slowly. Another sticky note, this time stuck to my whiteboard. "I'm in the library, both floors, all the study rooms. Come find me." Below it was my missing student ID, the one I'd lost 2 days ago. The photo on it wasn't mine anymore. I stared at my student ID until my vision blurred. The woman in the photo still had my brown hair, my green eyes, features I'd always felt didn't quite belong to me, like I'd borrowed them from someone else's face. But her smile was wrong, too wide, too knowing, like she was sharing a secret joke at my expense. Like she knew why I'd spent my whole life catching glimpses of someone else in mirrors and windows, why every reflection felt like a reminder of something I'd forgotten. Running my thumb across the surface confirmed it wasn't photoshopped. The plastic was unchanged, unaltered. My stomach churned as I stared at that twisted smile, that familiar yet wrong face that wore my features like an ill-fitting mask. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. A text this time. "Getting colder, Jennifer. You should put on your blue sweater." My hand shook as I fumbled with my drawer, but the sweater was gone again. A new sticky note sat in its place. 3rd floor, reference section. The library was a 5-minute walk across campus. Every rational thought screamed at me to lock my door, call campus security, call the police, call anyone. But that face on my ID haunted me, its knowing smirk taunting me with secrets I couldn't begin to understand. Someone was wearing my face, stealing my clothes, moving through my life like a shadow made flesh. And now they were leaving me a trail of breadcrumbs. I shouldn't go. I knew I shouldn't go. But the questions burned in my mind like a fever. How did they get my family albums? How did they change my ID photo? What else had they taken, changed, replaced while I wasn't looking? The answers were apparently scattered across both floors of Miller Library like some twisted scavenger hunt, and the need to know clawed at my insides, stronger than fear, stronger than reason. Snow crunched under my boots as I crossed the quad. The security guard station came into view, and I almost stumbled. Officer Reeves always worked the night shift. I'd gotten used to his friendly wave, his habit of doing crossword puzzles in duplicate because he claimed it helped him stay alert. But tonight, 2 crosswords lay abandoned on his desk, both half-finished with identical answers. His coffee cup sat next to them, still steaming. The monitors behind his desk showed empty hallways, except I froze. In one screen, Officer Reeves walked down a corridor. In another, he walked up a stairwell. The timestamps were identical. I hurried past the station. The library itself was open 24/7, accessed with student IDs. I swiped my card. The light turned green. The first floor was dark, emergency lights casting long shadows between the stacks. My footsteps echoed on the linoleum. No, not echoed. There were too many footsteps. They came from above and below, ahead and behind, perfectly matching my pace. In the glass doors of the study rooms, my reflection multiplied like a hall of mirrors, each version of me slightly different, one looking ahead, one glancing back, one with that too wide smile I'd seen on my ID. The clock above the circulation desk ticked steadily, but each hand showed a different time, spinning in opposite directions. A light flickered on in a 3rd-floor window, then another, and another, spelling out a pattern. My phone buzzed. Warmer. The elevator doors opened as I approached, though I hadn't pressed the button. Inside, my reflection wore the blue sweater. I took the stairs. 3rd floor, reference section. My blue sweater draped over a chair, a stack of photo albums on the table beside it. Family albums, my family albums. The one on top was open to a photo I'd never seen before. Mom and Dad at the hospital, the day I was born. Mom held 2 babies. My phone lit up with a text from Mom. I'm sorry we never told you about Rachel. After the accident, it was easier to pretend. But she didn't die that day. She just changed. We had to send her away. But she's been watching you, protecting you. She's ready to come home now. A hand touched my shoulder. I turned. The woman wearing my face smiled that too wide smile. Found you, she whispered in that familiar voice. Your turn to hide, sister. The lights went out. When they came back on, I was alone. In the window's reflection, I wore the blue sweater. My smile was too wide. My phone had one unread message from an unknown number. Tag, you're it.
The first Polaroid arrived on a Tuesday. I remembered because that's when Michael dropped off Tommy for his week with me. We'd spent breakfast talking about his science project, a solar system mobile that kept tilting to one side. His small hands struggled with the string lengths, but he wouldn't let me help. I can do it myself, Dad, like Mom showed me. The words hung between us, heavy and unspoken. I was still thinking about them as I washed the dishes, his half-eaten toast abandoned on the plate. The envelope sat innocently in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in precise block letters. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph of me sleeping in my bed. Last night's bed. The digital clock on my nightstand clearly showed 3:47 a.m. My hand trembled as I studied the image. The angle suggested it was taken from my bedroom doorway, capturing my entire king-sized bed, the one that felt too empty since Jennifer moved out 6 months ago. Her side still held the dip from years of sleeping curled on her left, one hand always reaching for mine. The drawer of her nightstand stuck halfway open, like it had every morning as she fumbled for her reading glasses without looking, determined not to fully wake until she'd had her coffee. The sheets were twisted around my legs exactly as I remembered from this morning, but without her gentle teasing about my restless dreams. I dug my phone out and pulled up my text thread with Jennifer. This isn't funny. If you're trying to scare me because of the custody arrangement. A quick response appeared. What are you talking about, David? I sent her the photo. 3 minutes passed. I was in Portland last night for work. You know that. Maybe you should talk to your therapist about this. Of course she'd say that. Ever since the divorce, she'd been trying to make me look unstable. But I knew better. This had to be her, my Jennifer, who used to leave post-it notes with terrible puns in my lunchbox, who taught Tommy to identify constellations from our backyard, who still remembered to send birthday cards to my mother even after the separation, the woman who'd stayed up all night when I had my first anxiety attack, running her fingers through my hair while humming that old Beatles song she could never quite get the words right to. Who else would want to terrorize me like this? That night, I double-checked every lock, window, and corner of the house before bed. Through Tommy's cracked door, I could see him curled around his mother's old sweater, pretending to sleep. He did that more often now, faking sleep to avoid our goodnight routine. The stuffed bear she gave him sat untouched on his shelf, gathering dust. I placed a kitchen chair under my bedroom doorknob, like in the movies. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of camera flashes. The next morning, 2 more envelopes waited in my mailbox. The first contained another shot of me sleeping, from last night. The chair was clearly visible, wedged under my doorknob. Clock reading 3:47 a.m. The second photo made my blood run cold. It showed me tonight, in my bed. The clock read 3:47 a.m. The chair was gone, and in the darkness of my bedroom doorway, a figure stood watching. I checked my phone. 7:15 a.m., Wednesday. This photo hadn't happened yet. Dad, who are you talking to? Tommy's voice carried from the kitchen. I quickly shoved the photos into my pocket. Nobody, buddy. Just thinking out loud. Tommy stared at me from behind his cereal bowl, spoon frozen halfway to his mouth. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He wasn't sleeping well either. A row of untouched comic books lay beside him, the ones he used to beg me to read together every morning. Now they just collected dust, like so many of our old routines. Uncle Michael says I should tell him if you start talking to yourself again, he mumbled into his cereal. My chest tightened. Everything's fine, Tommy, I promise. The lie tasted bitter. How about we read one of those comics? He pushed them away, shoulders hunching. Maybe later, Dad. As I walked to the kitchen, I could have sworn I heard Jennifer's laugh echoing from upstairs. That bright, unexpected sound that always started as a snort before blooming into full joy. The laugh that filled Tommy's shaky phone videos of her attempting to skateboard in our driveway last summer, her arms windmilling as she refused to admit defeat. The same laugh that used to wake me on Sunday mornings as she tried to teach Tommy how to make her grandmother's pancake recipe, both of them covered in flour and failing spectacularly. But that was impossible because she was in Portland, wasn't she? The next week became a blur of sleepless nights and prophetic Polaroids. Each morning, I'd find both the proof of last night's surveillance and a preview of tonight's horrors. The figure in the doorway grew closer with each future shot. I started taking sleeping pills to force myself into unconsciousness, but they only made me more vulnerable. In one photo, the figure was at the foot of my bed. In the next night's preview, it would be sitting on the edge. I found Tommy in Jennifer's closet that morning, running his hands over her dresses. The floral one she wore to his school play still held its shape, like she'd just stepped out of it. "They don't smell like her anymore," he whispered, fingers tangled in silk. "But you said she wore this last week." The date tag from the dry cleaners caught my eye. October 12th, last year. The fabric crumbled to dust in my mind, but when I blinked, it was whole again. "David, honey, you look terrible. Have you been sleeping?" Mrs. Peterson asked as she brought her usual Wednesday casserole. "Jennifer's been stalking me," I blurted out. "She's breaking in, taking pictures." Mrs. Peterson's face did something strange, a mix of pity and fear. "David, Jennifer hasn't—" "Dad?" Tommy interrupted from the stairs. "Who are you talking to? The porch is empty." I turned back, but Mrs. Peterson was gone. The casserole dish sat on the welcome mat, collecting dust. It looked like it had been there for months. That night's preview photo showed the figure touching my face while I slept. But something about its hand seemed wrong. Too familiar. Like Jennifer's hand, but decayed. I called Michael in a panic. "I need to talk to Jennifer. This has to stop." A long pause followed. "David, we've talked about this. Jennifer died in that car accident last year. That's why Tommy stays with me now. The doctor said these episodes might happen." "No," I cut him off. "She was just here. She brought Tommy last Tuesday." "David, I've been bringing Tommy every Tuesday for the past year." My fingers found the prescription bottle in my pocket. The label swam before my eyes. The date, the warnings, the doctor's name. Dr. Harrison, Psychiatric Unit. Patient, David Wheeler. For episodes of dissociative. I blinked, and the bottle vanished. Just like the grief counseling pamphlets I kept throwing away that reappeared in my bedside drawer. Just like Jennifer's coffee cup that stayed warm on the kitchen counter until I touched it. My head spun as memories started to fracture. Jennifer handing me papers in the hospital waiting room just 4 months ago. But no, that couldn't be right. Was it divorce papers from last spring, or the death certificate I still hadn't signed? Tommy crying in a black suit that still had the price tags on it. We had to buy it that morning. He'd grown so much since his last formal clothes. The police photos of her silver Volvo wrapped around the old oak tree on Ridge Road, the "Drive Safely" sign still visible through the shattered windshield. The mail slot clicked. Tonight's preview photo fell to the floor. In it, I wasn't alone in the bed anymore. Jennifer's corpse was curled up next to me, her dead eyes open, staring at the camera. The clock read 3:47 a.m., and behind the camera, holding it in the doorway, was me. I sat in my dark living room, surrounded by Polaroids spread across the floor like fallen leaves. Each one told a story I'd been desperately trying not to remember. The clock inched toward 3:47 a.m. Jennifer and I at Tommy's 5th birthday last spring, her smile radiant beneath the happy birthday banner she'd hand-painted. The same smile she wore on October 13th, the night she drove out to bring me my forgotten medication. The night it rained so hard they had to close Ridge Road. The night I called her at 3:15 a.m., confused and desperate, not remembering where I was or even what month it was. My first episode, the night she never came home. "The delusions are your mind's way of coping, David," Tommy's child therapist had said, adjusting her glasses and glancing at the intake forms dated 3 months ago. You've created a reality where Jennifer left by choice in June because accepting her death in October is too painful. The divorce papers, you remember? They're her life insurance forms that you still haven't filed. More memories cracked through. The funeral last October I convinced myself was a divorce hearing. The grief counseling sessions every Thursday I transformed into custody battles. Tommy's tears at Christmas dinner when I set a place for his mother, insisting she was just running late at work. The calendar on my wall with Jennifer's handwriting, dentist 3 p.m., dated the day after the accident, that I kept convincing myself was next week's appointment. The mail slot clicked again. This time, when I picked up the Polaroid, my hands were steady. I already knew what I'd see. Me, in bed, at 3:47 a.m., with Jennifer's corpse beside me, and behind the camera, myself, because I'd been taking the photos all along. The Polaroid camera sat exactly where I'd left it, next to my sleeping pills and the old clock permanently stuck at 3:47 a.m., the time they pronounced her dead. Every night I woke up at that exact time, took a photo of my empty bed, convinced myself she was still alive, still leaving me, still somewhere I could reach her. Then I took tomorrow's photo, staging it exactly as my broken mind needed to see it. The figure in the doorway was always me, watching myself sleep, trying to catch a glimpse of her, hoping to see her paint-stained fingers straightening Tommy's blankets one more time, or catch the scent of her lavender shampoo that used to linger in our sheets. The way she'd whisper, "Scoot over, starfish," when I took up too much space, but always ended up wrapped around me anyway. "I'm so sorry, Jennifer," I whispered to the empty house. "Dad?" Small footsteps creaked on the stairs. Tommy stood there in his pajamas, clutching his mother's old sweater. "You were talking in your sleep again. About Mom." I looked down at the photos scattered around me. In the dim light, I could finally see them clearly. Dozens of shots of an empty bed. No figure in the doorway. No Jennifer. Just wrinkled sheets and hollow space. But as I gathered them up, the last photo caught my eye. It was tomorrow's shot, the one I didn't remember taking yet. The bed was empty except for Tommy's stuffed bear, the one we buried with Jennifer. And in the doorway, two figures stood watching, one tall, one small. The clock struck 3:47 a.m. "Mom says it's time to stop taking pictures, Dad," Tommy said, taking my hand, his small fingers icy cold. Behind him, in the darkness of the hallway, I saw a familiar smile.